Welcome everybody, I'm Jeremy John, and I want to take you into the fascinating world of tour guiding. Every day in London, you'll find eccentric personalities guiding people in the footsteps of history. Some show historic architecture to overseas visitors, while others bring history to life for school groups. All the best tour guides have one thing in common. They know how to tell a good story. And that's why I started this podcast, to capture the stories of these tour guides. You will find out what drew them to this profession. You will discover which sites they love the most. And you will hear the secret methods they use to make history come alive. Today I have two guides on the show. I have Lauren Barnes.
Hello.
And I also have Bex Newell.
Hello.
And today we are going to be talking about many things involved with being a street historian. These two tour guides especially I've got onto this show because they have something in common, not just being tour guides, but specifically they are two tour guides that also specialise in food tours. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing about that, and maybe some of you listeners will get quite hungry listening to it. First, though, I always like to start by getting into their backstories and also finding out which tours they give. So we're going to start with the tours they give. Lauren, can you please tell me which tours do you give?
So I do the classic tours around Westminster, such as the changing of the guards, the outside view of Buckingham Palace. But I also like to take guests to neighbourhoods kind of outside of the Westminster area and to explore the food. So I like to take guests to Spitalfields Market. I also do food tours in the trendy, lively neighbourhood of Soho, where we are now, and also Borough Market, which is the most popular food market in London. And finally, I'm a huge lover of art, so I love guiding around the National Gallery as well.
Lauren, that all sounds wonderful. Bex, over to you. Which tours do you give?
Well, this is fascinating because, like Lauren, I also do a tour of Borough Market. But interestingly enough, we've never met before. So it's actually really great to be here. And I'm so thrilled to meet Lauren as well. As part of that tour, we also go across the river into Leadenhall Market, which is a beautiful old Victorian market in the city of London. The other tour I do is a miniature pub crawl of City of London pubs, weaving in stories of the literary history of the area whilst also having a drink. And my favourite tour, which is very close to my heart because it's where I come from, is a tour taking in the flavours of Brixton.
The flavours of Brixton. Marvellous stuff. Great. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm glad to be the person to introduce you both to each other. Before we go into the nitty-gritty of the tours that you give, it's very good to get your backstories and find out more about how you ended up becoming tour guides in London. So first, I'd like to start with you, Lauren. How did you end up doing this trade?
So my background is in acting, and I was looking for a different kind of filler job to do in between jobs, and I stumbled upon guiding, and it was just perfect because I got to talk to people and show off, but in a nice way. And it was just really interesting. And since then, it's become my full-time job, really.
Lovely. How many years ago was that you made the leap?
That was about 5 years ago.
So just before the pandemic?
Just before the pandemic. During the pandemic, there was no acting. There was no tour guiding, as you know. And then I went to work in the NHS for a year and a half. Then when guiding started to come back, I realised just how great it was and how much I'd missed it. I think the time I spent at the NHS was really insightful, and I learned a great deal, mostly how important and great the NHS is and how we must save it. But yeah, I was very happy to come back to guiding.
Fantastic. And in that sort of period of time where you couldn't do any acting work, couldn't do any guiding work, you're working with the NHS. I mean, I'm guessing you had long hours, but when you did have free time, were you sort of brushing up on history and imagining what you would do when guiding returns?
Yeah, definitely. I think I spent a lot of that time kind of thinking about what my next steps were going to be when guiding came back in the hope that it would. And of course it did. And that's when I started looking into courses. And now I'm just about to finish the Blue Badge guiding course. And I think if I hadn't have had all of the time during the pandemic to think about the fact that I wanted to take guiding more seriously alongside acting, I might not have chosen to do the course.
Fantastic. Yeah. So just for the listeners, the Blue Badge course to which Lauren is referring, we have several guiding courses in London. Some of them are based on the part of London where you are a guide, and the Blue Badge course is for London and beyond. I can't remember. There's a set term for it.
Yeah, so I'm doing the London one, but they're all over the country, and the London guides can guide other places as well. You have to know everything about everywhere. The entire history of the United Kingdom, apparently, which I didn't really know, but now I know.
Fantastic. It makes you sound like a walking encyclopedia.
Well, I am now. I'm not at all.
Well, thanks for that little backstory there, Lauren. And
okay.
I want to now pass over to Bex. Bex, what led you into guiding and when?
So I'm relatively new to guiding. I'd say I've had about 2 years worth of guiding that I've been able to get in. So I started post-pandemic when tourism was coming back to London with a bang. I'd worked 11 years following my graduation from university in a desk job, corporate medical assistants, actually. So there's a medical theme going on here. Yeah. And that involved the not so nice side of travel, mainly business travel, mainly helping people who were traveling abroad and got sick, needed medical evacuations, needed hospitalizations. And so once I left that job, I kind of also fell into guiding. I just happened to find the company I'm currently working for, Devour, who run these fabulous food tours. And they gave me a shot, and I found out that I had a knack for it, and I kind of got the guiding bug. So as well, another commonality, just as you're finishing your Blue Badge course, I'm about to start mine. So I will be starting in September. Very, very excited, a little bit overwhelmed, but it's a bug that I've completely got now, and I am addicted to guiding, and it's the best job in the world, in my opinion.
We are now going to get onto the big hot topic, the thing which you mentioned, these things you have in common, but this big thing that you do, which I must confess, I don't tend to do. I've given the odd food tour. I do sometimes take people to places where food can be consumed, but I have not mastered the art of food tours at all. So let me start with you, Lauren. Can you give me some more information about those food tours that you do?
So, well, I'll talk about the Spitalfields tour. I started off doing that with a company called Eating Europe, who are great all over Europe. But the Spitalfields tour is particularly important and special to me because, like Beck said, her heritage is in the Brixton one. Mine is in Spitalfields and the East End, and it is just such a diverse neighbourhood. So there's all different kinds of food, but they've all got a historical reason for being on the tour. And I think that's what makes a food tour special. You're eating these foods for a reason because of the history of the neighbourhood. It's not just like, have a cup of tea. Why are you having it? And funnily enough, we don't have a cup of tea, actually. But there's a reason why you're having fish and chips. What's the history of it? Why are you having a bagel on Brick Lane? And the history behind all of that. More recently, in the past year, I started working for Totally Tailored, who work with the Borough Market. So we do insider tours where you get to meet the vendors, sample all the food, and you just keep feeding people until they can't eat anymore, which is great. There's quite a lot of freedom with that one. So it's more guest-led. We don't necessarily have a route. The guest can say, I like cheese, and then I'll go, okay, let's do all of the cheese in Borough Market. That's what you want.
That sounds very exciting. Now, Bex, I want to ask you about your food tours now. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yeah, so one of my favourites is the in the City of London, covering 4 different pubs. So I give people a crash course in the City of London, the Square Mile, what it's all about, all of the different elements of finance and journalism and literary history and the industries that have built up there. And as we do that, we go to 4 different very old, very historic pubs in and around Fleet Street and the surrounding city. And we'll have a taster of some British pub classics, some real ales as well, which is very different for mainly American tourists to try, who are maybe more used to draft beers. And throughout all of that, the best thing about that tour is the City of London itself, and the fact that due to its nature, due to the fact that it's built up around the old Roman street patterns of the city and the medieval street patterns, there's all of these little hidden corners, windy alleyways to take people down. And so it feels really special for guests when they're exploring all of these secret places where they may not feel as confident to do it on their own, and to see them by the end of the tour have that confidence to maybe go out and explore the city on their own and go a little bit more off the beaten path compared to, you know, the big ticket item kind of areas is really quite special.
This is really interesting because if I think food tour, I'm thinking, you know, food, but this is the tour aspect, I suppose. So are the kind of walks between the food stops just as important as the food itself?
Oh, I'd say so, absolutely. The food is a vital element of a food tour, of course, because why else would people book on these tours? But what I've found with a lot of the guests that come on these tours is they want to know more about the area that they're in and where they're situated, and how that situation and how the area is developed has informed the places that you see around you. And so the big themes that come up with the City of London pubs tour is pub culture. And you can't really discuss pub culture on Fleet Street without discussing the history of journalism to a certain extent. But also the fact that people come on these tours, they want to know how Londoners live, what the culture of an area is, how it kind of develops in tandem. And so alongside the drinking and the pubs, the other major theme that you get in the City of London is Christopher Wren and the building of churches after the Great Fire of London and the rebuilding of St. Paul's. And so it takes a certain amount of skill that is, I think I'm still getting used to. It's very much a learned art, and I'm developing that skill, is how to package up all of these things and kind of weave them together in a way that doesn't feel forced, in a way that makes sense and gives you a rich kind of well-rounded history of the time, the place and the space that you're inhabiting with these people as you're experiencing these things together.
It sounds very immersive. It also strikes me that there's an interesting combination of being in the past and being in the present. You know, you're examining the past, but you're eating food that hopefully was cooked on the same day, or at least the last few days, rather than, you know, I don't think Christopher Wren left behind a sandwich or something which you get to sample.
No, thankfully not. But we may go on the hunt for Samuel Pepys's buried cheese. So, you know, who knows?
Just for listeners, that is a reference to the diarist of the 1660s, Samuel Pepys, who, when London was on fire in the Great Fire of London, he put in his diary that he'd buried his cheese, his Parmesan cheese specifically, which then would have been a store of wealth, believe it or not, would have been very valuable. He wasn't just, God, we're back to the topic of cheese. He, on your food tour, would have loved to have indulged in the cheese. What else did he bury? Can you remember? There was something else.
I think it was wine
or port, wasn't it?
Wine or port that he buried as well. But the thing is, and the thing about that entry, that series of entries into his diary, is that he mentions all of that and the burial, but he never mentions going back to retrieve them. So you've got this eternal mystery, you know, the hunt for Pepys's missing cheese. I've completely forgotten where we've gone with this conversation now. What did you ask me?
Maybe on your food tours, then you could also take spades with you and just start digging in random spots, you know. Yeah. We had that in the car park up in the north of the country, the bones of a king. It wouldn't be great if suddenly somewhere there is, I don't know, a garden somewhere and you discover... It'd be very mouldy by then, though. Would you eat old Parmesan cheese? I mean, there's aging and then there's aging.
Yeah, I like a mature cheese, but probably not that mature. Yeah.
We learnt at the very beginning of the podcast episode that both of you work at Borough Market, even though you've never crossed paths. Or maybe you have and you just didn't realise it. Well, now you can't escape each other. Sorry, that didn't come out well. But what I want to talk about is the history of Borough Market, but specifically your roles as tour guides there, because it gets very busy, Borough Market. I'm often, personally as a tour guide, someone reluctant to recommend it. Certainly at certain times of day, I would caution visitors to London from going there unless they have an action plan. But let's start with you, Lauren. How do you navigate Borough Market and how do you bring that history, that heritage to life there?
So when we do the tours within the market, first of all, we've got special lanyards because there's a special rule in Borough that you can't, due to how busy it is, you can't take big groups in there because otherwise it would just be impossible. So the market is really, it was designed as a place for the people. So as much as it's a really popular place for tourists to come because it's amazing, the trusts that run the market, one of their main goals is to make it accessible for Londoners still. They don't want it to be run over by big tour groups all the time. So they've got a strong security team. And I'm lucky enough to work for the company that have the official right to guide within the market. So that plays to my advantage. But also we work with the market to guide when it's not super busy. We wouldn't lead a tour at midday at 1 o'clock, just because that's not fair on the vendors either, because they're getting loads of business. We also don't do tours on Saturdays because it's already so busy. So we'll do ones when the market opens and then we'll do ones towards the later afternoon. But it's still, especially at Christmas time, it's chaos. It's so busy, but it's amazing. So you can see why it's busy, but yeah, you gotta keep hold of your group. I like to wear colourful hats.
And do your tours go to? I mean, Bex talked about the importance of the tour that goes beyond food, but goes into the history and heritage, especially between eating. These little stops and walks between the different places to get the food. How does that play out in Borough Market? Do you take people just outside the market to the sites like Southwark Cathedral, or do you actually stay in the market and point out the bits of heritage which have survived there?
Yes, I do a bit of both. Certainly we walk around within the market and you can see the old schedule of rents, which dates back to 1910. And that literally is history right in front of you. It's when it was a way of controlling the market. So the market's always been very fair, you know, everyone's got to be on a level playing ground. So they're making sure that no one's undercutting anyone, no one's charging more than they should. And that's still up on the wall, preserved there.
Just quickly to be clear, this is when the market was not a market of street food stands, but of fruit and vegetables.
It was a fruit and vegetable market. Yeah. From the 17th century. Prior to that, it was kind of sprawling out all over the area, all over London Bridge, the actual bridge itself. Then in the 1700s, the structure that you kind of see today was built. But there's newer parts as well, like the hot food out the back, where you can get a delicious humble crumble and other lovely foods to eat now. So that's more hot food to eat now. And then within the market, you've got some of the traditional traders. You've got your fish stalls, you've got your fruit, your veg, your cheese, your spices, your oils. That's more food to buy and then take home and create something wonderful in your own kitchen.
Lovely. So a lot of the time spent inside. You did hint at you do take people out, but do you take them out at the beginning or at the end or in the middle? How does that play out?
Oh, it depends how it's going, you know. Sometimes I'll just, if you want a breath of fresh air, it's right on the corner. You can get a beautiful view of Southwark Cathedral. So if the crowds are getting a bit busy, you can just kind of show your guests the magnificence of that, because that dates back to the 12th century. An amazing cathedral with really good historical links and a famous cat.
dare to tell us more about the cat, or should we leave that one hanging in the air?
Ooh.
Tell us about Hodge.
Hodge. Hodge is a cathedral cat, and he's got his own merchandise. And he's very, very popular and very well loved. The one previous to that was Dawkins' Magnificat. And when he died, he had to have 2 memorial services. I think one of them was filmed for people to kind of mourn for him who couldn't actually be in the country.
Wow.
He was loved by all over the world.
Presumably those cats also are good for controlling the mice in the market.
Possibly, although I'm not sure if they really come out of the boundaries of the cathedral. But Hodge is rather chunky, so maybe he definitely gets his fair share of market scraps. Of which there aren't many, actually, because another thing that the market does, which is brilliant, is they work with lots of local charities. The way they control food waste there is brilliant. Nothing really gets thrown away. At the end of the day, when the market closes at 5, the people from the charity are there controlling all of the food waste, making sure it doesn't get wasted. It goes to someone who needs it.
Lovely. Bex, you also give those tours of Borough Market. I'm curious as to how they are differing from Lauren's explanation, but also what they have in common with what Lauren has just said.
Yeah, so as Lauren said, her company has the exclusive access to guide inside the market. So one of the ways that we avoid the crowds is that we stick to the outside of the market and look in. We also hit the market early. So the market's open 10 a.m. daily, and the earlier you can hit the market, the better. We start our tours at 10 a.m. and we are hopping around the periphery of the market. We still get to look in. There's a lovely street called Stony Street with the 2 pubs outside. We normally stand outside the wheat sheaf and look in at that beautiful 17th, 18th century structure. Sorry, I'm going to correct myself there. 18th, 19th century structure. Mm-hmm. But yes, we in and around the periphery, we're still going to some of the best stalls that the market has to offer, but we're staying away from being right in the middle and right in the mix. And as Lauren said, by the time you get to the lunchtime period, that's when the crowds really kick off. So by that point, I'm already done with serving our guests some lovely fish and chips from the fabulous fish kitchen and talking about the history of that wonderful food. And then we say goodbye to the market at that point, head across London Bridge, and that's when we go into Leadenhall Market, which guests always tell me is such a different vibe. You get the buzz, the atmosphere, the crowds of Borough Market, which is quite a lively space to be in the presence of. But then you get into Leadenhall Market, which is very much a smaller market, a quieter market, a different pace, a more leisurely kind of atmosphere. So they get 2 sides from 2 different sides of the bridge, which I think is quite lovely.
It almost sounds like a meal itself, where you have your starter, your main course, and your dessert.
Yeah, absolutely. Aptly, we go into a French patisserie in Leadenhall Market. And so we finish with a little bit of dessert. And then we, after that, head across the road in the city to a beautiful little wine bar to do a wine and cheese tasting. So it's a really nice ending to the tour. And also, as you've said, follows the pattern of a meal quite nicely.
Wow. I'm wondering about this because starting early then, around 10 o'clock, and it sounds very gluttonous. You know, you're talking through all these foods and then, oh, there's dessert. Oh, and then there's cheese and wine. For me, as a history obsessive, it sounds more like the meal that Henry VIII would have had rather than your everyday visitor. But I'm sure they are enjoying the indulgence. But I'm just wondering, starting at 10 a.m., presumably you tell them not to have any breakfast.
Yes, you do generally. The way those tours are advertised is to start the day on as light a footing as you can in terms of your stomach contents. I always ask people when they've started the tour, have you had a very light breakfast this morning? And they nod their heads and you go, good, because you are going to get full. And your reference to Henry VIII is also very apt because, yeah, it sounds on paper like it's going to be very gout-inducing, but it's very much a tasting menu. So you're not having full portions of things. You're having little tasters as you go along. Little walks in between to kind of try and burn some of that energy off. But what I also say to guests is I don't feel like we would have done our job properly if you don't leave the tour full. If you don't leave the tour satisfied and like you've had enough and you want to go off and have, you know, a late lunch somewhere afterwards, I'd feel like we haven't fulfilled our purpose.
I want to ask our guests now about what they think are the elements that make a really good tour. So I'm going to start, please, with Lauren. What do you think makes a tour great?
I think it's great if the guests really have an openness to wanting to learn more and really experience an area. When you're able to show someone something new or unusual, showing them something that they have never seen before, or learning about something that they just had no idea about the history of that, I think that's what makes a really great tour. For example, it's always great at the end of a tour when someone says, we never would have done this on our own. We never would have had that experience. I think that's what makes it really special. And a lot of the time, you just end up having a great time with the guests. You're just hanging out, chatting, having some food, having some drinks. It almost doesn't feel like work. And that's when it's, that's great. Also, if you can open someone's mind as well to something. For example, I don't like oysters. I'm never going to try one. We take them to Richard Hayward's. They have an oyster and they're like, well, I never would have thought I'd have done that. And the, husband or wife is like, oh my God, you ate an oyster. Something like that, where you, give someone just a really memorable experience.
That's interesting. How do you get that husband to eat that oyster? Do you cajole them with facts about how important it was in London's history? Or do you just sort of say, eat oyster or else?
Eat oyster or else. Eat oyster or regret it on the plane home. I think it's something that you can only really do in that moment. I mean, they can eat oysters at home, but the history of, the oysters, for example, they used to be a food of the poor in London. They used to be like chewing gum is today on the pavements, just thrown away because they were so cheap and affordable back then. So I think that a bit of the history helps as well. But, they also get a bit of what happens on tour stays on tour, or when on tour, when in Rome, when in Borough Market. Try something new and you are going to get the best quality stuff there as well.
That's interesting, because what you're sort of suggesting here is if you can get them to be away from their day-to-day mindset and get them in this different reality for a while, the reality of your tour in that market, they will do things they wouldn't do in their daily lives. Is that a fair enough statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a guest just the other day who said, she kept saying, I'm a very plain eater. I only eat salads. She tried some Indian food. She tried some Burmese food. This was over in Soho. Didn't drink, only drank water, had a cheeky little sip of a cocktail just to try the different flavours. And I think when you kind of really get to show someone's taste buds something new when they're here, why not? We've got such an amazing, diverse mix of food in this city. That's partly what it makes it so great. It's, a melting pot. So if you can try that food here, then why not grasp that opportunity if you're feeling open to it?
It strikes me that your role as a guide there is important, because this same person you mentioned, who we shall call the salad eater, if left to their own devices, presumably if you hadn't been there and they happened to be in the market, would have probably found a salad. But is it the elimination of choice that you're saying that's where we're going, or is it just encouragement?
I think it's a bit of both. Encouragement. Some people have certain ideas on what they might want to eat in the market because they've seen it on TikTok, and where everything is great. There's a lot of smaller businesses that haven't necessarily had that kind of promotion in terms of, so much stuff is on social media now. So I like to show people, maybe instead of trying the chocolate covered strawberries, which everyone's seen on TikTok, there's a small family run farm that have some amazing strawberries locally grown as well. So I like to kind of give people a choice and show them something that they may not have had the chance to see on TikTok or Instagram, because it's a smaller business which is just relying on local custom.
Bex, are you also finding that to be the case with clients, that some of them have seen videos online and then you take them to the place which isn't promoted online?
Yeah, definitely. So the thing that people mention in the Borough Market context, which I think you're alluding to, Lauren, is the chocolate covered strawberries, which you will see all over TikTok, Instagram. You will see people queuing to go and get these chocolate-covered strawberries, and people will ask me my honest opinion. And my honest opinion is they're overrated. So the fact that you're taking people and saying, hey, here's an alternative family-run place that just does great, fresh, local produce, I think really opens their eyes to don't always go for the biggest, flashiest thing that you're seeing everywhere. Some of the hype, on the flip side of that, can be justified. So you mentioned Humble Crumble as well earlier. And Humble Crumble, I would say the hype is definitely justified there because they're offering something different. So I think it ultimately depends on which vendors you're talking about. But yes, trying to direct people to the family-run places, to the places that don't have the sort of the big internet draw behind them is refreshing. And I think people thank you for that at the end, because as much as giving them a sort of a guided tour of the area, you're also giving them tools to go off and explore on their own. So that will be recommendations for things to do afterwards. That will be hints and tips to avoid the more kind of honey trap places that you find in and around London. And I think Borough Market's gone the same way as any popular destination within London, is that you will have a mix of good and bad. You will have the mix of the really authentic stuff, and then you will have the more honey trappy style places. So it's great to decode that for people who are visiting.
Yeah, I hadn't realised that they would be asking you for opinion. I mean, it's obvious now you say it, that as they've come on your food tour, and if they're going to be in London for quite a few more days, and you are the ambassador for food in London, that they are seizing their chance to ask you for your opinions. So it seems you're actually wearing quite a lot of hats in that job. As well as being a history guide, you're a food guide, but you're also almost being their planner for the rest of their holiday as well.
Absolutely. They're keen to look for recommendations for you. And because in contrast to a more traditional walking tour where you are just talking about, you know, the hard facts and the stories and the history of an area, you are wearing the hat of host as well as the hat of tour guide. And people are very interested and curious about you as a person. So they want to know about you, your life, how you live in London, what you like to do. And they will take your cues from that. So they really feel like they're getting an insight into lots of different dimensions of London, not just the history, not just the food, but how you as a Londoner exist within the city. And then they'll go off and take their cue from you, which is great because, you know, I can give them a list as long as my arm with recommendations. If you like different foods, you can go here or here. If you like history and culture, here's some off the beaten track kind of places. If you don't fancy the crowds of the British Museum, you know, try one of the smaller museums instead. And so they're getting a different experience in London that goes beyond just the, I've done Buckingham Palace and I've done Changing of the Guard and I've done, you know, all of the things that people think that they need to check off their list in order to have experienced London. And you give them that insight that actually it's not always the case. And sometimes going and exploring the wider world of London beyond just the sort of the big ticket items is actually really worthwhile doing and will improve their trip to London immeasurably.
It strikes me the hard thing then for you, if you have these lists longer than your arm and they're only in town for another couple of days and they've already got a couple of things booked for those couple of days, that there's a lot of process of elimination. Do you ask them certain questions to really shorten that arm length list?
Yes. So a lot of the time, one of the first things I do is ask them what they've been up to in London so far. And that gives you a really good gauge in terms of what their general interests are. And if they tend to say the standard things like I've been to Westminster Abbey and I've done the Tower of London, you know, you can delve deeper into that further. Where have you been going to eat? You know, what are the things that you've liked the most so far on your trip in London? And so that kind of, you know, very gentle line of questioning gives you an insight. And then the great thing with these food tours as well is they're social. And so it's as much about getting to know people during the course of the tour as it is, you know, doing the hosting element and doing the guiding element. So as the tour goes on, something that a guest might mention might spark an idea and go, oh, well, you've just mentioned you like this. And you can very naturally lead into a recommendation of, you know, something that they would like that leads off the back of that.
I must say, and I am someone who loves tour guiding, clearly, I've set up a whole podcast about it. However, listening to both of you, this does sound quite intense. Are you quite drained after giving these tours?
Yeah, definitely. But in a kind of good way. So if I've just finished a tour in Soho, I like to pop to Chinatown, to my favourite little place, to get a lovely crepe. Pop to the pub over the road, get a half, and then I just stand there in silence. It's really nice, and I eat my crepe and I drink my beer. But yeah, you do need to unwind after that in whatever way, you find fit. But yeah, certainly it's a lot because you've got to be attentive the whole time. When it's a food tour as well, you've got other things to worry about. It's not just, is everyone having a good time? Are they interested? Road safety, make sure no one's getting run over because everyone's looking the wrong way. Most of our guests come from the States and we've got, all of these bikes whizzing round. But you've also got to take people like to come on our tours, even if they've got allergies or intolerances, which of course is completely fine. Like, I think if anyone is thinking about coming on a food tour, but going, I've got celiac disease, I can't have gluten, I'm lactose intolerant, you can still reach out to the tour provider and certainly we'll try and make sure that you can still, because there's so many options. But that's one thing that can be an extra thing to think about, making sure that it's been transferred to all of the vendors and because then you've got someone's health in your hands as well, not just walking out into oncoming traffic. You've also got to make sure you don't give them a thing that they're severely allergic to. So loads to think about.
Wow. You're carrying a lot on your shoulders here.
I know.
I want to ask Bex a bit about this really intense job role that you're doing, but I just want to very quickly clarify, because you mentioned having a crepe and a half. Now, for those listeners that aren't British, half is a half pint of beer. I learned that many places around the world don't do that measure. It's not a specific measure. I think about it, just saying a half.
Oh, yeah, half a lager.
Yeah, half a lager.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, you mentioned having a crepe and a glass of beer after your tour. Does that mean you're not eating while on tour?
No. I mean, it is... I couldn't eat on tour because if I'm doing these every day. Also, when you got your mouth full, the few times where I have thought, I'll just pop, a little bit of fish and chips in. These people only have a short amount of time with you and they really want to ask you all the questions they can. So often, as soon as I put something in my mouth, I get asked a question. I've got my mouth full. So, you always have to try the food that you're offering people. But I always go back after and I eat afterwards. It's kind of an experience for them. Although sometimes people really want you to eat with them. They get sad and they're like, why? It's like, it's fine. I've had it all many, many times before and I will just... enjoy watching you eat.
Lovely. You say try it before. Do you mean on the day?
Oh, no. So
I'm imagining one of those servants for the king just testing it's not poison or something.
That'd be great. But then I'd be too full to move and I'd be too sleepy to do the tour.
Right.
So, no, we obviously quality control, check everything. That's a really good part of the job. You got to check the cheese. And yeah, just know what you're describing, because that's another part of the job. You're describing what they're eating in quite a lot of detail. So you need to have an experience of that yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Bex, have you got anything to add with the intense nature of this job role you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. It is very intense. If I was to give a tip to anyone looking to become a food tour guide, try, if you can, not to do more than one tour a day. I've been in my situation where, sometimes needs must and you've got to earn some money and you've got to do two. And so I'll do a morning tour in Borough and then an afternoon tour in the pubs in the City of London. And I have a social battery. My social battery, believe it or not, although I love being around people and tour guiding, but it drains quite quickly. And so by the end of that, having to socialise with people, make sure that people are getting along well, make sure that, as Lauren said, allergies are covered for, that people aren't running out into traffic, that you're situationally aware of what's going on, that bookings are in place and the food is coming out correctly. The brain does go into overload. And so, yeah, making sure that you're taking proper care of yourself then becomes really imperative. And thankfully in the job that we do keep fairly fit because we're walking around a lot. But keeping all elements of yourself kind of healthy and refreshed and to keep going, because you'll have to get up the next day and do it all over again. And so it's having those little moments to yourself, especially before and after tours when you're in and around London and you have that little downtime. As you said, I will tend to go off and find a park somewhere with a book and just have a read, and that will be my refresh and kind of reset, and that will get my social battery charged back up for sure.
Giving food tours, I'm sure, doesn't always go to plan. So I'd like to ask both of our guests on the podcast about any of the tours which haven't gone quite as smoothly as they'd hoped. Lauren, let me start with you.
All right. So quite a long time ago now, I had a large group and it was part of their itinerary that a food tour was included. So they hadn't specifically booked onto this. It was an experience that was offered in their week-long tour. And it was a crowd of older people. And there was one lovely lady who really wanted to try everything, but she was working out her allergies. So she had some sort of allergy, but wasn't quite sure what it was to. So it was just like, well, I'll try things and I'm sure I'll be fine. She wasn't quite fine. We did run into a bit of a problem when she ate something that she probably shouldn't have, and then proceeded to get a little bit poorly. Very quickly recovered in the middle of Borough Market, where I was really worried because I was thinking, oh my goodness, am I going to need to call an ambulance? Do I need to get hold of their tour provider? Her husband seemed very relaxed, which was quite comforting.
Sorry, just to be clear, when you say she got a bit poorly, are we talking she was vomiting?
She was vomiting and kind of sweating profusely and lots of liquid coming out of her face. And everyone around me was like, what are you doing? And I didn't know what, it was quite scary.
What was her husband saying?
He was like, it's okay, this happens. And just kind of patting her.
Patting her. So the listeners can't see this, but Lauren is doing with her body. Well, Lauren is with her hand, imagining patting someone.
He was kind of patting her caringly.
Is patting a medical method to help someone who's having...
perhaps soothing her. But, she was... And then I was like, are you okay? What can I do? Do you need an ambulance? She said, no, I'll be okay. I said, what can I get you? Do you want me to run ahead to the next stop and get you some water, bring it back to you? She said, no, I'll catch you up there. Get me a large white wine. And within 5 minutes, she'd caught up with us. Our next stop, very conveniently, was the pub. A large white wine wasn't really part of the budget, but, I did it for her. And then she was totally fine.
Bex, has anything on your tour not gone quite to plan?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. And the story I have comes from one of the things I've been getting involved with more recently, which is training other guides, specifically on a new tour in and around Brixton. So I love Brixton. It's where I come from. And it's also a really important area in London when we're talking about its post-war history. Lots of people from the Caribbean islands in the 40s moved over to live and work in London, and they're known as the Windrush generation. And a lot of the Windrush generation moved into the area of Brixton, which is also now home to Latin American and West African communities. So therefore, we give tours which focus on that food history. And on this particular occasion, I had a group of guides with me to deliver them the tour and basically train them on how to stop at each stop. What are the talking points that we need to hit? What are the foods to try? And also giving them the amazing opportunity of going and trying all these things. So we go to our first stop, which is a wonderful place called Maureen's Brixton Kitchen. And I am going to give them a shout out because it's an experience that you've had like no other. You go to Maureen's house where she cooks you jerk chicken. She's open most days, every day from Tuesday to Saturday. And we go as soon as she opens in the morning. You can smell the jerk chicken cooking from down the street. It's incredible. So it really builds the excitement. But of course, space is at a premium because you're at Maureen's house, and it is very much al fresco dining because you're dining on picnic benches essentially in her backyard as you're watching this wonderful jerk chicken being cooked. So one of the downsides to this, or one of the perils of this, is that you are exposed to the elements. And on this particular day, the heavens started to open and it started to rain. And you just think, oh goodness, this is going to be the one thing, the one test of this tour is, what do we do when it's raining at Maureen's? The staff at Maureen's all have extended family, basically. And so Maureen and the rest of the people who worked there immediately sprang into action. They brought the tables and chairs inside into the front bit of her kitchen. And so we all sat around. Maureen stuck on the television and stuck some cricket on, which was amazing. And so we got this really, what turned into, this could be a really huge downside to this tour. You know, when we're dealing with the British weather, we can't rely on it being, you know, sunny and beautiful all the time. But we then discovered that we're going to get Maureen and her family's best Jamaican hospitality. She'll bring us right inside. We'll all cram around these picnic tables in her kitchen, watching the cricket and enjoying the most delectable jerk chicken you can imagine. So what started out as being a bit of a panic moment for me, you know, we've got this fatal flaw in this tour that we didn't anticipate, turned into actually one of the most wonderful elements of the tour, because we know that when we go to Maureen's, we're going to get looked after. And that's really part of the whole spirit of that tour and what it's all about, really.
That is a very beautiful story, and it's making me a bit emotional because listeners to this podcast, some may know that my grandmother was Jamaican, and she also moved from Jamaica to London back in the 1940s. And well, a lot of what you said about Maureen's household reminds me a lot of her. And she passed over 6 years ago, and there's rarely a day when I don't think of her. Bringing it back to Maureen, isn't that wonderful how something that's potentially negative with the rain turned into what can only be described as an upgrade?
Absolutely.
To be able to be inside there, the house of Maureen and Maureen's extended family. So I love that shout out to Maureen. And I think that's a beautiful note to end our podcast on. It almost feels like one of those tales. You know, when people say things about if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Well, if Maureen's house has rain in the garden, she will welcome you in.
Go inside and watch the cricket.
Watch the cricket and enjoy yourself. Fantastic stuff. Folks, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I can't thank you enough. That's a big thank you to Lauren Barnes.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
And it's a big thank you to Bex Newell.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. This has been an absolute delight.
And of course, it's a big thanks to you, the listener, for tuning in. Until the next one, take care.